Welcome back to the Daily Factor. Well, let's go to the United Kingdom. And a 38-year-old British man was jailed for terrorism offences for sharing explosive manuals and extremist videos, including one apparently celebrating the New Zealand mosque massacres, which took place in March of 2019. And this happened on a right-wing chat groups. Michael Nugent of Surrey ran a number of far-right chat groups on the Telegram app using different identities to express his, and I quote, hate of ethnic minorities and to share terrorist-related documents with others. Now, a judge at the Kensington Crown Court in southwest London jailed him for 3.5 years. Well, joining me to discuss this, I'd like to welcome AHAMMED Hussain. He is the spokesperson for the MPACUK in the UK. He is coming to us direct from London in England. Assalamu alaikum, Ahmed, and jazakallah so much for joining us.
Walaikum assalam. Barakallahu feek. Thank you for having me.
Now, it's an absolute pleasure, Brother Ahmed. We've seen the rise of right-wing groups just yesterday. I mean, this just takes a whole different level, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a whole different level because just think about the level of thought and effort that this guy has gone into. He's said in the past that he saw terrorism as the only way out. He described the Christchurch attack as a game changer. And as you pointed out, he was sharing manuals on how to create weapons. This was a dangerous man who really believed in his hate.
And I think what adds to this also is that we see the rise of Islamophobia, especially in the western part of Europe. And I mean, this right over here just sort of fuels the fire to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what we see is the legitimization of this hate. What do I mean by that? We hear politicians like the main contenders in the French presidential election, for example, we hear those contenders drumming up Islamophobia. We also, in Austria, hear the chancellor saying that he wants to make, quote unquote, political Islam a crime. So this is feeding into, not only feeding into, but legitimizing the grievances that these Islamophobic extremists have.
Brother Ahmed, let's look in England, and from my understanding, and maybe you can correct me, I mean, it seems like it's a very liberal sort of democracy, one would call it, that, you know, religious freedom is there for many different religious groups. What, of course, Michael Nugent has done, does this now allow there to be more right-wing groups to sort of filter into the United Kingdom and just make life very difficult for many minority groups?
Well, as I said, when politicians legitimize these right-wing extremists by taking on their concerns and putting them into their platforms, that's the exact opposite of a so-called liberal society. So for many decades now, we see, for example, parties in the UK pushing out the claims that, you know, we need to tackle immigration, but then taking it further than just general xenophobia, really targeting the Muslim community. So, you know, the PREVENT program we have in the UK, which is supposed to tackle so-called Islamic extremism, that's specifically tailored for targeting Muslims. And, you know, sometimes they catch right-wing extremists as well. But the majority of people under this so-called anti-extremist program called PREVENT, it catches Muslims who have normal Muslim concerns. You know, it might be young people who are talking about Palestine. It might be older people who, are concerned about what politicians and media are talking about. If they, in their schools or talk to their doctors, if they raise these points, due to the PREVENT strategy, the public authorities have to report Muslims to these, to the PREVENT officers and so on. And the thing is, you know, religious freedom, on the face of it, you could say the UK has religious freedom. But if there's anything that shakes the status quo, then that is immediately shut down. And we've seen that a lot recently in the UK when young people who, you know, they've foregone mainstream media. You know, mainstream media does not have the power it used to have. When young people through social media learn about the reality of Israel's true nature, and they go into their schools and they talk about Palestine, and, you know, they talk to their friends about Palestine, and they want to do something about Palestine. And you have to remember, a school is a place where a young person learns how to interact with the wider world. So they want to talk about issues that concern them at school. And yet when these young people, some of them Muslim, some of them not, when these young people talk about supporting Palestine, the Minister of Education himself, Gavin Williamson, sends a letter to schools saying that this anti-Semitism, this criticism of Israel, must be clamped down. Where's the liberal society there? Where's the religious freedoms there? So it's very much a case of double standards.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the fact that you silence bringing up topics which are real world, I mean, that is definitely a cause for concern. Brother Ahmed, the 3.5 years that, of course, the judge at the Kensington Crown Court sentenced Michael Nugent to, is that the right punishment, or should it have been harsher?
Now, from an individual point of view, maybe that's harsh enough. But what really needs to be done here, because this is clearly a man who's thought these things through, is the idea itself, which we need to crack. And we need to understand, where is this idea coming from? It's coming from not just the fringe, it's coming from mainstream media as well. So let me explain that. How is the mainstream media helping shore up the mentality and the worldview of people like Michael Nugent? Well, when the mainstream media presents, you know, loads and loads of Muslims coming to Europe, going all the way through Europe, and yet they do not talk about the reasons they are fleeing, that shores up, that gives fuel to the grievances of people like Michael Nugent. When they don't talk about the contemporary and historical support by European states for, you know, it might be security, or it might be anti-terrorism, the Western support for states, for the situation that they're fleeing from, whether it's Libya, whether it's Syria, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, when the mainstream media refuses to talk about the true reason why Muslims are leaving their homelands in the first place, that shores up the Islamophobia. And it goes beyond the mainstream media as well. When we have politicians, like I said before, legitimizing the concerns purely for the sake of political convenience, you know, for scoring cheap political points. If we continue to see the media and politicians legitimizing the grievances of people like Michael Nugent, then there will be many more people like Michael Nugent. Remember, he wasn't just a guy coming up with these ideas himself. He was participating in and administrating these platforms as well. There are many people like Michael Nugent. Unless he only shared those manuals with undercover cops, there's a lot of people who have benefited from Michael Nugent's actions. It's not enough to just punish one man. We have to address the falsehoods, the Islamophobic falsehoods that underpin the very idea that he represents.
And of course, him being just a needle in the haystack sort of adds to that. I mean, it's going to make it very difficult, and as you say, addressing the issue as a whole from a collective perspective. Ahmed Hussain, we'd like to say Jazakallah to you for making the time for us, and inshallah, we'd like to speak to you soon on many matters coming out of the UK.
Barakallahu feek. Thank you for your time.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Ahmed Hussain, the spokesperson for the MPAC in the UK, coming to us direct from London in England. And of course, the big concern there is nationalism, and what does it fuel in people like Michael Nugent? Well, coming out after the break, it'll be our community news. Do stay tuned.